talk about Hello World yet. I'm going to go into, again, I've got my internet set up here, into Chrome. So I'm going to launch Chrome here, and I got my standard screen going on. And I want to go to GitHub, right? So, and I recommend GitHub is probably the easier way to do your version control. Okay, again, not a requirement for this course, but I recommend it anyway because I think it's a great place to go for your all your version control needs. A couple of reasons why it's good to go to GitHub. One, it's open source, right? It's free. You can actually subscribe. When you subscribe to GitHub in the first place, you get a free account. On the downside, though, you can't create private repositories, okay? Unless you want to pay, right? Well, that's okay if you want to pay. It's actually a good service. The great thing about GitHub, though, whether it comes to Mac or to Windows, if you scroll down here in the main GitHub screen, you can actually download. It's not here, actually, but you can download this GitHub Agent for, and I'm kind of signed in here, and that's why it doesn't show it. I'd have to kind of log out, but. Let me see if I can log out here. Sign up. Yeah. So if you look down here, right, as an example, way down here, you can download GitHub. It says download GitHub for Mac. It's also available for Windows. Unfortunately, for those Linux users, not so available. You have to kind of download another tool. But the great thing is for on the Windows or Mac systems, on Mac as an example, I have this little tool called GitHub, which actually allows me to sync up my my repository on my machine with the cloud, okay? And what it does is it allows me to kind of, if I launch it, here's where I'm going to launch it here. Okay, here's on the Mac. Well, I'll show you on the Windows in a second. We'll kind of actually install it on Windows. It's a good opportunity. It shows me my repositories here, and if I actually go up on GitHub, it actually shows me some repositories I have there, right? And what I can do is I can clone to computer, and it actually transfers my repository from the stuff I have online to my machine. Now, a good strategy is, right, to clone your repository so that the repository that's on your machine, right, is where your projects are for Visual Studio 2012, right? And then what you're doing is you're actually updating your repo online with your project files, right? So if you make any changes, whatever, and you want to step back, well, your GitHub allows you to do that. Otherwise, and by the way, there are integrated tools within Visual Studio that allow you to do this. This is just a very simple way of doing it, okay? So here's my repos that I have. They're online. I want to transfer them to my Mac. I just click Clone to Computer, and I'm there. But I'm not going to do it here. Okay, I'm going to go back onto the Windows side, and in this particular case, I'm going to have to leave Unity mode to do it. It's a little easier. So I'm going to go down to View. And hopefully you guys can see this. I'm going to go to full screen again when we record. I haven't checked it out. So here I am, and I'm not in Unity mode anymore. I'm in full screen mode, and I'm going to download GitHub for Windows. So the way you do it is you go to github.com. Okay. You're going to have to, you should create an account. I already have an account, but in order for me to get this file here, this download GitHub for Windows, I have to be signed out, or else I won't see this link. So I click on the link, I click on Run, right? And it's connecting, and I click Install. Okay, and it's 40 megs, so let it do that while we're going, right? So if you haven't done this, it's a good chance to do it now, right? If you're going to use any kind of version control at all. It's not required, so if you don't use version control in your code, I'm not saying, hey, do you have a GitHub account? I'm not going to go up on GitHub. It's for your own good, right? In other courses, I make it a requirement for you to have a GitHub account because you need to have some kind of version control or you're going to lose your stuff. Worst case in Visual Studio, you can step back a lot and recreate your app pretty simply. But just in case you don't want to spend all that time doing it, I'm giving you a way of protecting yourself, and this is the way. Okay, so downloading GitHub, and it's going to take its sweet time. And I wish in the video, please fast forward to the section where it's actually finished downloading. All right, here we go. It's finished downloading. I'm going to run it. Let's minimize this thing. And if you notice, it's going to say, hey, what's my username and all this stuff from my email? Well, if you don't create a username for yourself, and I recommend that you do, let me just log in here for a second. So I'm going to sign in, and I use my standard one from home. You can use whatever you want. So I'm logging in. Here I am. I'm logged in. And if I actually click on my name here on the top of GitHub, it has a bunch of these test repos that I have going on, right? If I want to create a new repo, and I will right now, here's a new repo, and I'm going to call it, let's say, C#, right? It'll actually create a new folder for me on this as well, right? So here's my C# projects. C#, not sharp. If I can actually type. And again, I have a choice of making it public or private repo. I'm making it public, and I'm going to create my repository. There's nothing in it right now, right? It's just an empty repository. So again, there's not much in it right away at all, but I have this repository that's been created. So now if I go back, and I'll remember my password, because it doesn't really matter. If I go back to my GitHub tool that I've downloaded for Windows, right, I want to put in the same criteria here. I want to put in my account after I've created it. Oops. And my password. And log in. Okay, so I'm logged in. I want to continue. Right? It says find local repositories. No local repositories found. I could have local repositories as well, but I'm going to skip in this particular case. But if I look at the GitHub, right now, if you notice, I have my C# repository that I just created, right? If I clone this repository, I click clone, my repository is now on my machine as well. So there's a space in my machine that I have a local folder that's synced up now that I'm going to sync up with GitHub, right? And if you notice the location, C, users, Tom, documents, GitHub, C#. That's where it exists. I can move this repository. I can change it to point to wherever I want, right? But right now, that's where it is. Okay, why am I doing this? Well, if I go there, if I go to C, users, Tom, documents, GitHub, C#, right? So here we go. And again, these is for people who've never done this before or whatever. It's okay. If you don't know what I'm doing, watch the video. You can kind of go through it over and over again. Here's GitHub. Here's C#. And here's Git. And I want to create a new file just to test, right? So I go File, New. Let's say, I don't know, create a new text document called here is my test, right? So I got a new test document. Go back to my repository. And if you notice, there's a little arrow here next to the repo. So if I go over to it, if you notice, there's this like yellow message that pops up that says, "Hey, you got some uncommitted changes," right? Because I've added in a file that's local to my system that doesn't exist online yet. I haven't put it up online yet, right? So I kind of say, well, what did I do? I added a text file, right, to my repo, and I click commit. Now I've got it committed, but I've got unsynced commits, right? I got to sync it up. A commit is almost like a snapshot of any change that I make to my local repository. Okay, that's what a commit is, right? Or it could be a snapshot of my repository that exists up in the cloud, right? But I've got to kind of sync up my commit. Okay, so I go back to my regular my repo. You notice these are all the things. If I go my local repository, here's my local repository right here, right? Here it is. But I've got to sync this up. I got to somehow sync this up with my my other repo. Now I can do a couple things. I can say I can publish this branch to the server. I could do this. Or if I go back, and if I go to my thing here, I can refresh. Let me just refresh. And when I refresh and go back to my repository, I have uncommitted, unsynced changes. So I publish my my changes. It goes back up to GitHub when I click on publish. And if I go back up to online here it is, and I go back out to my repositories, and if I look at, it's interesting. I did create a repository, I said. Here's my repos, C#. What do I have here? Here's my test. my text file actually got sent to my repo online. So again, all I'm doing is, it's a manual process, what I'm showing you here, but worst case scenario, you have a copy of your file online. Now what if, and you say this, you say, wow, Tom, that's a really lot of work for me to sync up my stuff and everything else. Why don't I just throw it up on a flash drive or put it into Dropbox or something like that? That's okay. However you protect yourself, saving in Microsoft is not enough, guys. Okay, I'm telling you right now, there's a chance you'll lose your files. You have to step back. This way, any files I save up online, I can always download them and install them right back into the place where I'm looking for my projects, right? And I don't have to worry because it's up online. And when you submit your projects to me, you give me a link of your repository online for that particular assignment, not your entire repository, just that assignment, and I can go up online without you having to go to Blackboard and download it. So I'm not going to train you on how to use GitHub because that's not in scope for this course. But I'm pointing it out as a really cool tool that I recommend to you for version control, well, for this particular course and other courses. All right, let's go back. And I'm going to go back actually to Visual Studio 2012. And if you guys saw that as a flash, watch the video. Let's go back into Visual Studio for a second. Here we are. And by the way, I'll do the same thing right now on the Mac side. I'll show you. Here's my Mac, right? I got no local repositories, right? And if you notice, I've got my C# project right here. And again, I want to clone to my computer. I click on it. It tells me where I want to put it. Clone as C#. It's going to put it in any directory I want it. I leave it in my home directory, no problem. And I click clone. And then what it does, it synchronizes my repository. So here's my repository called C#. And I've got it. I can actually go to my repository and see what I've got in there. And right now, all I've got is a text file. So the great thing is, there's another good way of working with another user, right? You can collaborate with other people on GitHub. And the great thing is, if you're a coder, GitHub is another place, another source that you might find other people's code or share your code with the coding community, if you're into that. Okay. Let's get back here and kill all this and get back on track, I said. Okay. And where the hell is my screen recording? Here it is. I'm going to pause this 191 meg screen recording right now and go back to Hello World.